We're on the Old Connecticut Path in Ashford, Connecticut. A short distance from here stands the homestead of the Chism family. And the Chisms were a long-time residents of Ashford and settled here early in the town's history. Harold Ayres, in his book, The Great Trail of New England, interviewed and traveled along the trail with the Chism brothers, David and Charles, during the 1930s. And their record and their recollection is written in Harold Ayres' book. So this morning we're going to take a little walk, as the Chism brothers did, along the Old Connecticut Path from their homestead here on Axe Factory Road over to the school that they attended. Now, the walk to school that they did was in the 1860s and 1870s. So almost 150 years ago, the Chism brothers, David and Charles, followed this roadway every day as they walked to school. Now, as they approached the Bigalow River, they came to a bridge going across the way that Charles describes the view as he remembered it in 1936, and we'll see it today. Charles noted that along the Hooker Trail we come to the Bigalow River. And the river is about 4 rods wide and at times is deep and dangerous. About 5 rods above the bridge are the boulders of an Indian or pioneer ford. We're approaching Bigalow Brook and walking out onto some of the stepping stones that remain that were placed in the brook to help in passage of travelers on the Old Connecticut Path. Now, as we look down, we can see the old bridge that Charles Chism recalled, and he noted that a short distance above the bridge were these stepping stones, that some have been rolled, like these here, have been rolled downstream by storms over the years. Most notably, it was recorded the storm of 1938, the hurricane, the flooding really rolled some of the stones that were in the center of the brook away. But we can see one of the stones on the side of the brook on the opposite shore. And as we come back here and look down, we can see the stones running right back up to the shoreline. Now, Charles Chism recalled walking across the river using the stepping stones on his way to school. And this is a place in my family's history where a young girl, Mary Hooker, daughter of Thomas Hooker, would have likely have been crossing on the way from Cambridge to Hartford with her family. And at that time there probably weren't stepping stones. It probably was they'd have to take off their shoes and walk through the cold running brook water here to get across. And this section of the Connecticut Path holds a special place for another member of our family, a young man named Roger Newton, who in 1640 completed his studies at Hartford and followed the Connecticut Path and crossed here, and likely also had to take his shoes off to wade through the brook on his way to Hartford, Connecticut, where he studied for and prepared for the ministry in the home of Thomas Hooker. And it was there in the home of Thomas Hooker that he met his future bride, Mary Hooker, and started the Newton family in America. We arrived on the east side of Bigalow Brook, and as you can see, it's a very good-sized brook. It's more like a river and not easily crossed. Now, the water flow through here is fairly intense. Charles Chism described going to school in the 1860s, 1870s, going down the hill to the bridge over Bigalow Brook, and the stones set for crossing of the brook. Now, he indicated that the trail, the Old Connecticut Path, didn't follow the roadway where the bridge is. It actually went straight up the hill through the woods behind us. And walking through the woods, it is possible to pick up traces of the old trail, the Old Connecticut Path, to this day. A portion of the old path that fell into disuse and was not maintained as a roadway You can see that finding portions of the old path requires a combination of X-ray vision, ingenuity, intuition, and tea leaf reading. You've lost all possible traces of the path. You discover once again, you find it, and it's a revelation how clear the route was selected to be easy to follow and match with the contours of the land. Road in Eastford, Connecticut. Having followed the Old Connecticut Path as it was described by Charles Chism, coming up the hill from Bigalow Brook and emerging onto Walker Road, and the path continues across Walker Road and through the barway here continues eastward towards Crystal Pond. We'll take a few moments to explore some of the sites here along Walker Road and the history of this area. As we're hurrying up the hill to school, they would come up the road from Bigalow Brook and arrive at their one-room schoolhouse. It's located just up the hill here at the corner of Walker Road. And as we walk up the hill, we can see that all that remains are a few stones that would have formed the outline of the foundation for the school. And right here, we would have the threshold or doorstep. I understand that the school itself did not fall down, but was carted away, disassembled and carted away, and now serves as a home elsewhere in Eastford. We're approaching the remains of the Shippey Place, a home that was located on Walker Road and immediately adjacent to the Old Connecticut Path. And as we pan back across here, you can see some of the intricate stonework that went into building a home. And I believe right here, as we zoom in, we'll see the remains of the central fireplace that stood at the house at that time. Distance up the road from the Shippey Place on Walker Road is the remains of what appears to be an enormous barn and the stone foundation of scale. I'm standing next to the foundation and I'm about 6 feet tall, and as we scan up you can see that it's at least 8-10 feet high, and we come in and take a look at the size of the stone that's here, and we can see that these would be enormously heavy stones to move into place, and to be doing all this work and construction without masonry, by hand, or by using ox teams or horses to help with pulleys to lift the stones into place. So we have something here that gives testament to the enormous effort that was expended by the settlers of this area to create places for their livestock and their livelihood here in the woods of Connecticut. Walking on Walker Road in Eastford, Connecticut, approaching an old box culvert that crosses the brook here, and immediately above the box culvert we'll zoom in and we see an active beaver dam. Beavers were fairly ingenious in utilizing an old stone wall along the roadway to form the base for their dam. And let's see if we can get right up close here so we can see how the dam's constructed and take a peek over the top here towards their lodge. Very clever and very strong in the use of all the sticks that they've laid out. And as we can look across the water here, you can see one of the lodges. I bring it in real close here, right on the edge of the water. Now this wetland extends all the way back to the place described by Charles Chism as the point where the Old Connecticut Path crosses. This is one location along the area of the Old Connecticut Path crossing that's still impacted by the presence of the beavers. We We've now returned to the point where the Old Connecticut Path crosses Walker Road. After having visited several sites along Walker Road, including the Shippey Place and the old one-room schoolhouse, both described by Charles Chism as points of reference for identifying the route of the Old Connecticut Path. Now we'll head east from here for a short distance along the Old Connecticut Path as it heads towards Crystal Pond in Woodstock. Downhill from Walker Road, through some blowdowns in the woods, to the edge of a wetland marsh. One portion of it we saw in a visit to Beaver Dam and Pond along Walker Road. But here we'll come to the crossing point of the Old Connecticut Path, at least as it looks today. As we look out on the wetland to the north, we come around to the point where there are traces of the path going across the wetland here, and we'll work our way around so that we can get to the other side. It's pretty overgrown in through here now, so it does require working downstream just a short distance to pick the trail back up on the opposite side from here. Crossed over, we had to jump over on some stones and grass tufts to be able to make it across the wet place. But here it's been washed away, and originally it was described by Chism as being an area across the wetland in which there was heavy stone and stepping stones laid out, which likely have been washed away over the course of centuries or buried under the growth here. But we'll walk this last little bit crossing the wetland, and we can see that it would be passable. It has not been maintained as a pathway for generations, so we have tree fall and flooding, but it is possible to still walk across it, even though the helpful roadbed and stones that were described as here by Chism are long gone. And we look back and we can see the path as it does come directly in a line across the wetland. Chism Homestead will come to an end for today here in the marsh and the causeway, former causeway across the marsh on the Old Connecticut Path. The trail is following and has landmarks that were identified by Charles Chism as early as 1936 from his recollection of his childhood. Now, oral history is likely to have been important to Charles and to his brother David as they heard the stories from their ancestors who settled along the route of the Connecticut Path and could tell stories about the people who traveled here and what the road was like and what the times were like that people traveled and settled here. And so as we end today here in what is now a wetland was once the vital trail from Boston and the Massachusetts Bay to Hartford for travelers, including the famous party of Thomas Hooker, of travelers across Connecticut on their way west to the Connecticut Valley.